Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson. When we were together last time studying the book of Esther, which we're continuing today, failed to say that, sorry. Um, Esther had successfully invited King Xerxes, King Ahasuerus, and Haman, the villain of the tale, to come to a banquet that she would prepare. And so we also had Mordecai not being pleased by any of this because even though he was so greatly honored, Mordecai still lives, and his hatred towards Mordecai is so great that he just can't enjoy the accolades that he receives, and so his plot to have Mordecai hanged was firmed up, and the gallows upon which he would impale Mordecai was built to spec at 75 feet high. Well, that very night, the king could not sleep. And we know why. He's just lost a major military campaign. He's back home. He's still the most powerful man in the world, but there are assassination attempts against his life. And so when he cannot sleep, he asks them to come in and read him the official records of what's going on, because that will be so dull, it will put him to sleep. And they read those records, and in those records, as they are reading them, he discovers that Mordecai has single-handedly thwarted an assassination plot. And so he wants to honor Mordecai, and he calls Haman to his presence to arrange this. When Haman finds out, this is all in chapter 6, that the king is going to honor someone with great honor, he thinks it's himself. Because who would the king want to honor more than me? Um, and so anyway, in fact, he tells the king how to honor this person. He says, "Bring a royal robe that the king himself has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, and on whose head the royal crown has been placed. And let the robe and the horse be handed over to the king's most noble princes, and let them array the man whom the king desires, and lead him through the streets." And so he says, "Great, you take care of it, and do it for Mordecai. Take quickly the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do so for Mordecai the Jew." That's how he identifies him. Mordecai the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not fall short in anything that you have said. It's such a bitter pill for Haman, but it's going to get worse. Haman took the robe and the horse and arrayed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city square and proclaimed before him, "Thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor." He has to lead the horse himself. Luckily, he didn't have to follow behind and clean up, but he did have to lead the horse himself and say with his own voice, in his own voice, that this is the man the king is honoring. Mordecai returned to the king's gate. Haman hurried home, mourning, with his head covered. Haman recounted to Zeresh, all his wife, and all of his friends, everything that had happened. And his wise men and Zeresh, his wife, said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish origin, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him." And while they were still talking to him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hastily brought Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. His wife and his friends, who seem to all be hanging out together when Haman gets home, no matter what time of day it is, they're all there together. I'm a little suspicious of that. I don't know if you are yourself. But anyway, they're all there at his house, and they've said to him, "You are toast." You know, this is the man. In other words, Mordecai at this point is in the position to thwart the extermination of the Jews, to figure out a way. And Haman is clearly the author of that plan to exterminate the Jews. And so they don't see a way out for him even before Esther has her banquet. And therefore the words that Mordecai said to Esther, "If you don't act now, rescue will come from somewhere else. But who knows that you're not placed here for a reason." And and we all are churning for him to say, God, God put you there. But that's the point of the book, I think. The point of the book is for us to be trained to see God when he is not named in the events. In our normal lives, day-to-day lives, nobody is saying, there's no writer, inspired writer saying, and thus, the accident did not happen because God, sent his angels. We're not told any of that. Um, and yet, we need to be able to see God in the events of our lives. And I think the book of Esther is training to that end. God isn't mentioned, but he's so clearly in charge of events that we are able to see him as the events unfold. And we certainly have already seen him in these events in the book of Esther. Well, Haman's downfall will be complete. We'll talk about that next time as he gets to the banquet and as Esther exposes his evil plot to King Ahasuerus, to King Xerxes. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes.